Chapter 488. Oh no. The next moment, the numbness from the ionization in the air disappeared. A huge gap appeared in the center of the electric net defense circle. The electric potential difference caused a high voltage to break through the air, forming a dazzling electric arc that bombarded the intruder's body. It was also at this moment that Gao Meng clearly saw the withered face revealing a satisfied smile. The intruder's body suddenly burst into flames, but the flames were a demonic dark red. In this strangely restrained flame, the figure's body instantly turned into ashes from the shoulder down, but the head and face remained intact. The red light from the facial orifices was so bright that it made one's scalp go numb. Gao Meng saw the red light shooting out from the withered head's eye sockets, brushing past his shoulder and heading straight for Ouyang, who was still in a meditative state. His scalp was about to explode. 4 rays of clear light rushed out from his body and formed a defensive barrier. He had indeed intercepted it, but the feeling of contact between the two parties made his heart sink. The seemingly fierce red light was almost like nothingness when touched. It had no impact at all. Gao Meng tried his best to detect the real situation. With his B-rank psychic ability, he could vaguely feel that there seemed to be a buzzing sound at a deeper level of interference from the red light. It was as if a giant crossbow had been set up with its tendons stretched open, accumulating an immeasurable amount of power and aiming in Ouyang's direction. The clear light barrier formed by Gao Meng's talismans not only did not obstruct the opponent, but it was like a ruler that helped the opponent to adjust his position in the depths of the void until he fired. At this moment, Gao Meng's mind was blank. He only felt that the clear light barrier he had set up was like 4 layers of thin gauze clouds that were instantly blown away without a trace. There was only an extremely tyrannical pure power that tore through the void and penetrated straight down. Perhaps it was only for 1,000th of a second, but an intense light burst out and a destructive power erupted in an instant. The sound of the explosion was like thunder, and the structure of the building where it was also collapsed. Gao Meng let out a muffled groan as his body was blown away by the impact of the storm. Along the way he collided with many tables and chairs in the air. More than 100 protective talismans spontaneously ignited, but the sky was still dark and he did not know where he was going. In the end, Gao Meng fell on the ruins of a console, bricks and rebars. His whole body was in pain and his ears were still ringing. He had lost his sense of balance. What was even more tragic was that his soul power was forcibly pushed out of the abyss by the powerful impact. It bounced out from the deep layer all the way until it reached the shallow layer closest to the material plane. Only then did it barely stabilize, but it was still a little blurry. However, he couldn't care less about these things. He gritted his teeth and struggled to get up. He wanted to see the consequences of the impact. However, because he had not completely digested the impact, he could not focus his vision for a moment. His vision swept across the surrounding area in a daze, and he was confused by the broken and messy buildings. After swaying a few times, he finally figured out the central area that had suffered the heaviest damage. He locked onto the decayed head that was still floating in midair. Extraordinary! The destructive effect on the material plane and the tyrannical impact on the mental plane combined to form a terrifying oppressive force. This was the level of an extraordinary. Of course, Gao Meng knew the despairing gap between an architect and a transcendent. But at this moment, there was no place for fear in the surging emotions in his heart. He just let out a howl and rushed up. However, before he could get up, he suddenly turned his head, turned his eyes and looked back and forth. Suddenly he let out a laugh and couldn't help but laugh. Where's everyone? Although 3 to 5 floors of the building had collapsed and become unrecognizable, this was the Shangding building without a doubt. The problem was, where were the permanent staff members here? Where were the engineers and technicians of the maintenance team on the 13th floor, which was full of laboratories? If it had really been bombarded, this place should have been a mess of casualties. However, other than the miserable ruins in him, there was not a single living thing around him. It was cold, bleak, eerie, and very strange. But Gao Meng liked it very much. He slapped his thigh and laughed completely. This was the logic world. This was clearly a spatial fault. Moreover, according to the stable structure of the void around him, he had not suffered a fatal impact. This proved that Ouyang was still alive and well. He was able to maintain this magnificent and rigorous magical world. Ouyang, where are you? Where I am. Ouyang Chen's reply was timely. At the same time, his figure appeared in the void where only the withered head was left. He was still wearing the white coat he was used to wearing in the laboratory. His entire body was spotless and he looked rather calm. Gao Meng laughed and cursed. He followed the edge of the broken crack and with a few leaps he returned to the 13th floor. He didn't know how the logic world was set up, nor did he know how Xianxia was able to take care of both sides and complete such an extremely difficult technical move. It could be said that his heart was filled with question marks, but in the end he only spat. "Are you filming? Why did you end up like this?" Sorry. I kept trying to wrap something up but I didn't succeed. Instead I gave the other party a chance. In a moment of desperation, there was a problem with the chi identification and I got you involved. It's my fault. Gao Meng didn't really understand and could only stare at the first question. Which thing? Xianxia didn't speak again. During this process he didn't move his gaze. Gao Meng looked over and stared at the withered head. At this moment, light flowed and overlapped in Xianxia's eyes. The effect of his extraordinary power directly caused the brightness and darkness of the void in front of him, the layers, the structure and the dimensions to change. This caused the area where the withered head was to become transparent. The unrecognizable laboratory ruins turned into an illusory silhouette, including the withered head itself. However, as the transparency increased, a turbid mist-like shadow gradually appeared in the area where the floating head was. It was generally a dark gray color and there was a faint smoke billowing at its edges. Gao Meng's gaze was unconsciously attracted to it. After looking for a long time he felt that something could emerge from the irregular shadow at any time. Right now the billowing smoke was perhaps the poisonous breath. Therefore, Gao Meng understood what Xianxia meant when he said he didn't succeed. This shadow was clearly something that was independent of the laws of the logic world. It was like an eroded wound that destroyed the integrity of the logic world. Oh, could it be that the extraterrestrial ballista came from here? It feels a little familiar. I think it was that time at Frost River Reality. Gao Meng was talking about the battle with the Order of Justice at the Frost River Reality flagship store on Fudong Avenue last month. Although he had not personally participated in the battle, he had seen the relevant reports. The circle of shadows before him was vaguely similar to the giant shadow arm that had turned the logic world upside down. However, the one Wang had attracted at all costs was like a demon from beyond the heavens. It was valiant, berserk, and unparalleled. The shadow in front of him had only eroded an opening and built a channel to transmit and control power. It seemed to be lacking in terms of level. As he spoke, Gao Meng looked at the unrecognizable building. He had fallen all the way down just now. He knew that at least 4 or 5 floors had directly collapsed. Even if the building was created from the logic world, its structural strength would not be any less. A single strike was enough to destroy it to this extent. It was not much different from a tactical missile. Gao Meng could not help but think of the treacherous method that the other party had used to bombard him with. If this method could be used at will, then wouldn't all living things in the world, be they ordinary people or ability users, be they not at their mercy? Gao Meng felt a deep chill when he thought of this. At this time Xianxia's analysis of the shadow had come to an end. He changed his method and suddenly asked, "Who are you?" Gao Meng was slightly startled. A deep and magnetic voice spread through the void. A lucky explorer, a clumsy researcher, but also a qualified businessman. One could see that even though the withered head was only an outline under Xianxia's analysis, it still made a clear and sinister smile. It was a stark contrast to the pure and deep voice that possessed an extremely professional style. It was this floating head in the shadow that became the medium for both parties to communicate. "My career has just started. I need to find a few investors to share the risks. I came uninvited today to recommend myself. I hope President Ouyang doesn't mind." Xianxia calmly responded, "I mind very much." "Then I'm really sorry. I admit that today's exchange was a bit impromptu, but we can try to make it a real demonstration. President Ouyang is a veteran extraordinary. You have exceptional insight. In your opinion, do you think that the methods I brought out today have the qualifications to cooperate with the Xia City branch?" Gao Meng cursed in his heart. The other party really did put on a negotiating posture. Whether it's cloning technology or the plain function, this method of free communication in the logic realm, we can use it to discuss. I believe that the Xia City branch has enough capital to carry out an exchange. Ouyang Chen waited for him to finish speaking and asked, "How should I address you?" Luo Yuan. Gao Meng noticed that this was a sensitive name that had just entered the database not too long ago. Ouyang Chen didn't seem to notice this. He immediately said, "Mr. Luo, do you know the name of the person you possess?" "I think it's Charlie." "Yes. He came here to apply for a job 12 years ago. He is now the father of 2 children. I've seen their children and have given one of them a name." "Oh, that's really unfortunate." "Alright, I understand what President Ouyang means. The threshold of morality is always laughable and makes people feel helpless." Luo Yuan sighed, but he still wanted to fight. "As a whole, don't you think the Xia City branch needs to discuss? I think there are many people in Xia City who need to know the right to know. For example, Elder Yu Gang. He is old. Doesn't he want to prolong his life? Another example is Her Majesty Empress Wu. She has the heart of the world and is a hero of the present age. Doesn't she want to go a step further? There are also some youngsters who are quite ambitious. They urgently need the ability to match their ambition. If President Ouyang Gang is arbitrary..." A cold light seeped out from Ouyang Chen's eyes behind his glasses. "I am the president and an extraordinary. I can't be willful even at this point. What's the point?" "Alright, I was thinking too much." The withered head opened and closed its mouth, transmitting Luo Yuan's deep and melodious laughter. "Perhaps President Ouyang and I are incompatible. Nothing will come of it if I stay here with you. Since this is the case, the intentions of other investors are very important. Therefore, I have another question. President Ouyang was able to turn over in time once. Can you turn over a second time?" Ouyang Chen stared at the shadow behind the head in silence. "I'll sell myself and boast for a moment. In some areas, my plane is more convenient than the president's psychic wave network. It's much more convenient." Amidst the loud laughter, the withered head that Luo Yuan controlled turned into smoke and dissipated without a trace. At the same time, the color of the shadow faded away. It gradually merged with the background of nothingness and returned to nothingness. The hole that probed into the logic world was closed by the other party. Ouyang Chen's eyes focused. He didn't say anything. He waved his hand and the void structure of the logic world disintegrated and returned to the plane of reality along with Gao Meng. In the blink of an eye, they were surrounded by the buzzing of the maintenance team's laboratory. At this time, the group of technicians were still in a daze. They were restless because of the emergency mode. When they saw Ouyang Chen and Gao Meng, who had disappeared for almost 2 minutes, appear again in their original positions, some people couldn't help but cheer. At this time, the ability users who stayed behind in the Shangding building had long since been alarmed. Elder Yu, who had been recuperating on the 12th floor, directly sent over a telepathic inquiry. But Ouyang Chen didn't have the time to explain. He just said to Gao Meng, "You take command." Then he entered a meditative state. Gao Meng was a bit confused, but he knew where he should put his effort. He immediately pressed the control panel and issued an order. "Enter resource protection mode in all areas except the municipal square. Increase the interference rate of the Kuwang Communications building with all your strength. Request the SCA to provide support to the energy center. No, bypass them. Just use emergency authority. Hurry." These words were transmitted through telepathy. If it could be done directly, it was done at the first instance. At the same time, he received the latest data. Interference rate 20%. Model conversion ratio 35%. It was already amazing to be able to reach this level in the beginning. But after seeing Luo Yuan's inconceivable dimensional ballista, Gao Meng felt the corresponding numbers completely stagnate. Then he thought of something else. He directly transferred the command to the mission channel and sent an alert to the Kuwang Communications building. "Move irregularly. Don't stay where you are." Gao Meng really didn't know whether his judgment was right or wrong. But he knew very well that Luo Yuan's dimensional ballistic cannon technique would be 100% certain death if Luo Nan and the others stayed where they were. Only when he sent the command did he discover that the other side had already begun to move. The mission channel still retained the warning and command from 5 seconds ago. "Luo Nan, the enemy is making a big move. Hurry up and leave. He Yuan, don't scatter. Format space synchronization. Cat eyes, bring the others." The group had already smashed through the side walls of the passageway and entered the office area of the building. The 3 deep blue walkers set up their formatting domain, wrapping Luo Nan and Cat Eyes within. They sped along the way, getting farther and farther away from the landing pad. Luo Nan ran madly the entire way. The structure of his body and soul was a bit shaken. The deep sea scene produced by interference rippled slightly, but it was nothing compared to the sudden surge of impact from the other side. He gasped for breath with some difficulty and locked onto the location of the motorcycle gang in the depths of the thick smoke. He had indeed noticed a few seconds ago that the enemy's operation method was a bit different from the previous assassin and pressure transfer network. A power that came from the depths of the polar domain or even the distant deep space directly interfered with this area. The motorcycle gang, who was previously an assassin, was now more like a ruler, a tool to lock onto and aim. However, Luo Nan's deep-sea interference scene continued to work, causing this area to become a relatively unfriendly area. It affected the accuracy of his positioning, forcing the other side to make a compromise. They did their best to allow the motorcycle gang to approach their location. Because of this, the motorcycle gang had changed from his previous stagnant state of a few dozen seconds ago. His figure sped forward like a violent storm, but the appearance of his sudden advance was truly bloody and terrifying. With every step he took from the bottom to the top, including his legs, torso and head, a part of his body would explode into a bloody mist. However, after the explosion, it would all be collected back into his damaged body. Then it would expand and explode even more areas. His body had been eroded before, but it was not as bitter and direct as it was now. In a mere 2 or 3 seconds, not a single piece of flesh remained intact on his entire body. Even his legs and feet were gone. He was not running, he was shuttling back and forth under the catalysis of the bloody mist. In the end, all of his body parts exploded cleanly into pieces, leaving only an outstretched arm. And this arm rapidly expanded as the bloody mist poured in. Dark green veins coiled around it, and it was as thick as a demon's claw. It tore through the air. Luo Nan's breathing became even more labored. From his perspective, this demon's claw was a murderous weapon that could chase after a soul and take away a life. It was also an aiming device for some even more terrifying weapon. It looked like one body, but it was actually 2 wheels. Compared to the bloody scene on the material plane, he was more worried about the incorporeal killing power behind the deep space. But the more realistic situation was that the demon's claw's assault was already enough to take their lives. The path of the demon's assault was an absolute straight line, and the surroundings of the claw surged with a fatal vortex of energy. The thin smoke in the office area dissipated in a single sweep before it could truly break through. The entire area seemed to have transformed into a blast furnace for smelting iron. Surging waves of heat swept across. It was enough to transform a person's body and soul as they approached. Crash. The floor was like a crispy biscuit. Half of it collapsed in an instant, and the tremors of Luo Nan's group brought the other half of the floor down. The 5 people fell at the same time. The kinetic energy of their running was transformed and they went all the way down. And the terrifying demon's claw charged up diagonally. The timing was grasped to the point of despair. God and Si Guoxing put on their most professional performance at this time. They clearly knew that the attack from behind was terrifying, but they forcefully maneuvered without the slightest hesitation. Their bodies merged inwards to block the front of the demon's claw's assault. But they were still too slow. The demon's claw exploded apart bit by bit in the instant they merged inwards to block the attack. It was like a multi-stage rocket from the olden days. Every time a segment exploded, its speed would increase by a notch. By the time all the flesh and blood of the single protruding index finger had exploded, this broken finger, which was about the size of a traditional bullet, had already broken through 7 times the speed of sound. It was like an electromagnetic rifle had opened fire. It directly passed through the gap between the 2 deep blue walkers that had yet to close up. It also pierced through the formatted domain and penetrated inside. Ding! An arc of light suddenly flashed, revealing an inconceivable trajectory. It accurately blocked the path of the broken finger, and then powerful kinetic energy instantly transformed into an ear-piercing sonic boom. Chapter 489. Interference rate 25%. Model conversion ratio 52%. Fluctuating. He Yuan wasn't like Luo Nan. Her senses could cross multiple dimensions to lock onto an unmanifested threat. But her combat intuition, honed over the years, gave her a premonition to deal with fatal threats. Aside from this, the concrete data reflected the problem even more prominently. The interference rate and conversion ratio fluctuated clearly. The rising momentum slowed, but the domain interference was still there. The great enemy was still there. It did not end because of the flesh and blood fingers exploding. This was a fatal moment. Luo Nan and the others fell from the collapsed floor. Under these circumstances, He Yuan had exhausted all of her abilities to use a sharp blade to split open the fingers that were exploding at 7 times the speed of sound. But the instant the flesh and blood exploded was the moment when a terrifying force of another level was released. No matter how amazing He Yuan was, it was impossible for her to gather her strength and resist the impact of a bullet that was on a level far above the speed of sound. The enemy clearly had an overwhelming advantage, but they just had to grasp the rhythm of attacking the weak. They were calm and callous, not giving anyone a chance. The group was still in the process of falling when the outer layer of the exoskeleton armor of the 3 deep blue walkers at the front suddenly exploded with fine sparks of electricity. The tough armor structure even underwent minute deformations. All the sensor devices went off in alarm. The corresponding impact had far exceeded the protective limits of the exoskeleton armor. And this was after the formatted domain had buffered them. He Yuan issued a warning, splash evasion. Cat Eyes let out a muffled groan. Her naturally spread open upper arms suddenly exploded with a bloody light. A terrifying gap appeared, exposing dense white bone. She didn't panic in the face of danger. Before the pain could truly take shape, she forcefully pulled back and curled into a ball, doing her best to reduce the area of contact with the outside world. Fortunately, she reacted in time. Light sounds rang out in the surrounding air. Those were the sonic booms of the exploding finger fragments streaking through the void. Every sound represented a terrifying killing power that could pierce through flesh and blood. And at this moment, the area several dozen meters around them emitted gurgling water vapor once more. It was as if a sauna was covering their heads, hot and humid. They crashed into the floor under the cover of the water vapor. Then they shot backward, wanting to forcefully charge out of the area covered by the flesh and blood fragments. Not good. This won't do. Luo Nan nearly bit off his teeth. From his perspective, the exploding flesh and blood were not just a fired bullet. They themselves were a taut bowstring on another level. A terrifying storm was brewing on the microscopic plane, connecting with the source of power in the distant deep space. Luo Nan utilized this power to the limit. Even if there were only milligrams of flesh and blood nearby, the power would burst forth, enough to grind them into dust. Luo Nan spared no effort to increase the structural strength of the interference scene. He strove to destroy the connection, and he did indeed achieve some results. Deep Space's fatal arrow didn't shoot at the first moment because the bowstring was affected by the effects of the deep sea map. It could only vibrate at the bottom of the sea and was obstructed. The surrounding water vapor was the result of this interference. The most critical problem was that the enemy had a real and practical fulcrum on the material plane. Even if the former biker gang had exploded, the flesh and blood fragments were still there. The foundation of the manipulation was still there. Even if it was only at the micron scale, it was enough to be used. As for Luo Nan himself, even though he was a living person placed here, he did not possess the strength and level to support the deep sea map to interfere with the material plane a step further. With the strength of Luo Nan's current body, he didn't even have the qualifications to forcefully do it. At this moment, the disturbances within the range of the interference scene accelerated the collision between particles. Soul power interweaved in a miraculous manner, as though an unprecedented and wondrous world had been formed in an instant. However, purely using soul power to interfere with the material world was only a basic framework, dividing out a bit of space within the inherent structure of the world. This space was unstable and he needed to pour more power into it. Something had to be added to the balance between nothingness and reality. Something had to be added to make this world of nothingness tilt towards the material plane. Who should I fill? At this moment, his closed system arranged all the elements in front of him and began to deduce them layer by layer. His thoughts might have spun thousands of times, or it might have been a flash of inspiration that really allowed him to find a bargaining chip that he could either put in or abandon. The external neuron trembled. At the core of the condensation ring, an even finer and more intricate structure was formed. It guided the soul energy and interfered with the image of the deep sea. Luo Nan's mind went blank. Most of his accumulated soul strength was instantly sucked out and coiled in the void. It formed a new structure erected in the middle of two distant voids. A marvelous door opened, blowing misty clouds into the two unfathomable worlds of the void. One was the cloud world. The other was the image of the deep sea produced by the interference. Only the two had nothing to do with the real world. In the next second, an enormous hairy arm stretched out from the spatial door. Each arm was over 2 meters long and it made a standard posture of cross defense. Such an enormous being could not be more striking even in the depths of the mist. However, the others were completely unaware of this, including He Yuan, who was carrying Luo Nan as she ran. This was because Luo Nan pulled apart the distance between him and the surrounding people the instant the spatial passageway was erected. Perhaps it was due to the difference in dimensions. In any case, the independent space, which was abnormally active with water molecules, was truly supported. It was faintly discernible, faintly distant, faintly illusory. In the previous instant, the fatal arrow had been launched, casting the shadow of a certain world down. However, the process from the moment it was launched to the moment it landed had already become a mote. The mushed-mouth ape Yuan Yi's enormous arm instantly combusted in the region where water molecules were abundant. Perhaps it turned into ashes, or perhaps some charcoal remained. It let out a pained roar, but this roar only exploded in the cloud world. Even though a bit of the aftermath seeped in occasionally, it merely reverberated within the water world Luo Nan had created. It was annihilated without a trace. However, the world constructed from the deep-sea map shook intensely at this time. It began to collapse layer by layer. The hurricane of impact blew over, causing Luo Nan to suddenly understand. No matter what kind of space it was, he was the center of the world. It would be fine if the impact force was consumed, but if there was any left over, he would be the first to bear the brunt. Did he get himself trapped? However, Sister Yuan and the others should be much better off. Before he could finish his thought, the interference components attached to his skin-tight protective suit heated up. A familiar sense of order expanded from his body, rapidly spreading outwards. The logic world. In an instant, the deep-sea map, the enemy's fatal domain, the logic world and the cloud world, which projected a bit of a shadow, twisted into a ball. A shattered maelstrom and warped laws burst forth in an instant, sweeping everyone's consciousness away from the polar domain. Luo Nan's mind went blank. The feeling of extreme weakness was like the pitch-black wings of a crow covering him. It made everything before his eyes turn dark. There was no longer any light. What did it feel like to be a thief, to be empty? Or perhaps he should ask, what did it feel like to be a bottomless pit? Luo Nan captured his self-awareness from his drowsiness due to lack of oxygen in his brain, and he inexplicably had this thought. He knew the reason why he felt like a thief, to be empty. It was mainly because he had forcefully linked the illusory space and time of the deep-sea map with the cloud world. At the same time, he had constructed a spatial skeleton and a passage between the two worlds. This had instantly extracted all of his soul strength. Although he was short of oxygen, he did not faint. During this process, he clearly knew that the closed system that belonged to him, which was the large production line formed by his believers, was still operating non-stop, producing a huge amount of soul power that was constantly being replenished. But the problem was that with the powerful production capacity of the large production line, after a period of time, a certain amount of reserves should be provided to alleviate the predicament of a dried-up lamp. But Luo Nan could clearly feel his soul strength pour out in torrents at an extremely stable and heroic speed. Could it be that he had become a large sieve after receiving a strike from the dimensional crossbow? Oh, the term dimensional crossbow was something he had gathered from the outside world while he was in a drowsy state. Luo Nan's dried-up mental strength took a slight turn for the better, and he forced himself to rouse his mind. He extended his consciousness in the direction of the pouring soul strength. In a moment of absent-mindedness, his telepathic thoughts cut into the cloud world where chaotic clouds flew about. The spatial passage was still there? Luo Nan felt the violent trembling of the air current in the clouds before he could finish his thought. The source was none other than Yuan Yi, who had forcefully blocked the dimensional crossbow's long-distance attack. Yuan Yi was swinging his already crippled arms as he roared madly. Admittedly, the destruction of his arms was one of the reasons for Yuan Yi's wretched cries, but the destructive power of an extraordinary was the source of his greatest pain. The mushed-mouth ape possessed an extremely powerful regenerative ability, But no matter how its wounded body regenerated, it was destroyed by the destructive power once more. This process repeated over and over again, bringing about enormous pain. Yuan Yi howled miserably to the heavens, and the enormous sound wave covered a vast area of several hundred kilometers. It shook the sea of clouds to churn, sending ice crystals flying in all directions and surging waves. Yuan Yi's howls of pain attracted quite a few of his kind to spectate. The corresponding mental senses shuttled back and forth in all directions, but Yuan Yi couldn't care less. Why do I know what happened several hundred kilometers away? Luo Nan's mind trembled, and he took advantage of the situation to spread it out. Soon he had a general understanding of what had happened. The soul cloak, the deep sea scene. They had truly given him a great surprise. He had once believed that the deep sea scene formed from interference in the previous battle had suffered the impact of the dimensional crossbow, and that it had broken down and collapsed. But from the looks of it now, there were still some skeletons left behind. The corresponding laws and powers also remained. It was just that the bit that remained was linked to the temporary pillar, Yuan Yi. It was struck by the powerful impact into the spatial passageway and poured into the cloud world. It would have been fine if this was all. With its incomplete structure, it would naturally collapse without the support of sufficient interference power. But perhaps Yuan Yi's pillar was remarkable, or perhaps the effects of the soul cloak were special, or perhaps the cloud world was a region rich in water molecules. Of course, there were other reasons as well. In any case, the deep sea scene, this special soul cloak, gradually recovered and became complete during this time when Luo Nan's mental strength was exhausted. Moreover, it continued to drift in the cloud world, spreading layer by layer. Right now, Luo Nan's first impression of the deep sea scene was that it was large. It was inconceivably large. For a time he was actually unable to calculate just how wide of a region this special soul cloak covered after drifting and spreading over this period of time. He only knew that the range of his mental senses, which he was once so proud of, was like a temporary shack when compared to this vast region. It was similar to the enormous metropolis of Xia City. He just wanted to use the range of his senses as a standard unit of measurement, but this unit was so small that it was meaningless. In this way, the source of the bottomless pit was revealed. Even though Luo Nan's accumulated soul strength was like a vast ocean of glaciers under the soul cloak mode, it was still insufficient for him to scatter it over such a vast cloud world and sufficiently interfere. Looking at it from a different angle, Luo Nan had yet to be sucked dry under such a terrifying momentum of expansion. This made Luo Nan look at Luo Nan with a whole new level of respect for his closed-system large production line. At this very moment, the soul cloak was pulling Luo Nan's consciousness to wander within the boundless and boundless layers of clouds. An interference scene of this scale could truly be described as grand and spectacular. Luo Nan really was excited for a period of time, but his thoughts changed once his initial mood passed. It seemed to be meaningless. Luo Nan felt that this was very inconceivable. His interference scene and the corresponding range of his senses had already expanded to this degree, but he was still unable to discover the edge of this cloud world. He was unable to discover the corresponding source of the bloody light reflected and flowing between the clouds. This world seemed to be practically the same up, down, left, and right. Or perhaps it was an infinite reproduction of a limited picture. There were practically no changes in this world other than the mushed-mouth apes that flew and wandered about. Luo Nan was finally convinced that this was a maze world constructed from the light of blood, energy, and clouds. If he didn't grasp the key to solving this maze, he wouldn't be able to gain anything new even if he multiplied the range of the soul cloak by 100 times. Luo Nan's mind stirred when his thoughts reached this point, and the expansion speed of the soul cloak clearly slowed down. Originally, he wanted to completely stop this meaningless expansion, but when the soul cloak's expansion speed decreased to a certain extent, he made a new discovery. The growth of his soul strength had clearly sped up, but it didn't return to the unbearable degree of before. Consumption and growth had reached an excellent equilibrium. This was also possible. Luo Nan was overjoyed. If he could use the soul cloak to effectively control the equilibrium between his body and soul, to reach the point where he could adjust the growth of his soul strength at will, to increase or decrease it at will, then he would be profiting no matter what. Luo Nan thought about the scene. When facing an enemy, his body and soul were coordinated as one, linked together. When he cultivated, the two were fully coupled and his soul strength was effectively fed back. In this way, the imbalance between his body and soul that had plagued him since the beginning of his cultivation would become history. Luo Nan inevitably spent some time on the soul cloak, adjusting the reserves and increments of his soul strength to a degree that matched the strength of his body. Sure enough, it felt quite different. As for whether or not it was the optimal state, he would have to carefully experience it in the future, polish and adjust it. Only now did Luo Nan turn his attention to another direction. He saw that Yuan Yi was about to be unable to hold on any longer. Luo Nan split his attention to circle around Yuan Yi's body a few times. He wanted to ponder over a method to help Yuan Yi resolve its pain, but he discovered that something was wrong upon closer inspection. The pitiful mushed-mouthed ape before him clearly had a fatal drain in its body, aside from the enormous amount of essence energy it consumed to regenerate. That fellow, the Wraith Sign, was still holding him back. Indeed, the Wraith Sign had been implanted into Yuan Yi's body a long time ago. It had devoured Yuan Yi's abundant essence energy to fatten itself. It seemed to be in a certain stage of evolution. This sort of devouring would have been fine in the past. With the mushed-mouthed ape's powerful essence energy reserves and regenerative abilities, the Wraith Sign would be able to maintain a balance no matter how greedy it was. But right now, due to the destructive power of an extraordinary, Yuan Yi needed to divide a large portion of its reserves to regenerate its limbs. And this gave the Wraith Sign a chance. The Wraith Sign's insatiable greed instinctively did not care whether the state of the parasite was good or bad. On the contrary, Yuan Yi's poor state caused its ability to control its own essence energy to decline. The Wraith Sign seized the opportunity to expand the scope of its devouring and absorption, finally breaking the balance. The mushed-mouthed ape was a natural hunter and a powerful warrior, but its instincts were still unable to understand the weight of its own life and death choices. It wanted to regenerate its two arms, but it was apprehensive of the Wraith Sign's devouring and absorption, causing its own state to run madly toward an irreversible and desperate situation. It was really enough. Luo Nan wanted to control the Wraith Sign's greedy instincts. After all, Yuan Yi was an extremely rare instant combat power. If it weren't for its existence today, He Yuan and He Yuan would have most likely died without a corpse remaining. Luo Nan was just about to give the Wraith Sign an order when a marvelous vibration suddenly came from the area covered by the soul cloak. It made his hair stand on end. Luo Nan's mind quickly turned to an area several hundred kilometers away. A thunderclap rang out from the depths of the hazy clouds. Two figures that were incompatible with the cloudy world he was used to appeared out of thin air. One of them was a bit familiar. She was wrapped in a layer of muslin clothing. Her figure was graceful, but it was illusory and unreal. Her hair hung down like a waterfall of green light, half concealing her figure. She was covered in a layer of cloud energy drifting back and forth. She was simply the best spokesperson for the cold ghost. Those snake tongue. Luo Nan's heart fiercely thumped a few times after confirming the identity of the newcomer. He nearly charged over. Luckily, he remembered that there was another fellow by Snake Tongue's side. This person also appeared in the form of a soul body. The strength of the aura that was exposed even exceeded the range of Luo Nan's usual estimations. Luo Nan could only rely on his senses. It seemed that this person wasn't much different from President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu. An extraordinary? Luo Nan's thoughts were still unclear when the air over there vibrated. The deviation in direction is too great. It's at least 300 kilometers. There aren't more than 3 people in the inner world who are able to warp spacetime and realize the teleportation of soul bodies. Not to mention that the spatial structure of this world is completely different from that of Earth. Secretary General Gong is too modest. Snake Tongue's tone was indifferent as she spoke flattering words. She didn't know that their conversation had already been transmitted several hundred kilometers away through some inconceivable channel. How could Luo Nan not know that the other person who had appeared in the cloud world in the form of an out-of-body state was the Deputy Secretary General of the Explorers Society headquarters, Gong Qi, who had graced Xia City with grace? The two of them flew through the air. They were probably shaken by Yuan Yi's roar or attracted by the aftermath of the spatial turbulence earlier. The direction in which they flew later also proved this point. Luo Nan didn't understand at all. Why was Gong Qi able to come to the cloud world? He was even more stupefied right now. What should he do next? Based on the speed at which the two flew, they would arrive in this area in half a minute at most. Luo Nan's consciousness could return to the real world, But what about Yuan Yi and the wraith sign on Yuan Yi's body? Even if Yuan Yi fled with all his might, he might not be able to escape the pursuit of an extraordinary like Gong Qi, let alone the fact that Yuan Yi was currently heavily injured. Luo Nan didn't believe that this sort of strange situation could be hidden from Gong Qi's eyes. What to do? What to do? What to do? Luo Nan's mind suddenly stirred when he was at his wits' end. The wraith sign's cheerful cry was like a hurricane that swept past. Yuan Yi's body structure finally collapsed after a long period of pointless struggle. His enormous body suddenly collapsed, transforming into a dense mass of bloody light. The wraith sign at the center of his body swallowed it cleanly. With the wraith sign's own ability, it shouldn't have been able to devour it cleanly and quickly. However, there was something else within the wraith sign that revealed its extraordinary power. The Blood Soul Temple. The Blood Flame Order viewed the Blood Soul Temple as their foundation, but a freak combination of factors formed a symbiotic relationship with the wraith sign. The Blood Soul Temple suddenly stole the show, working hand in glove with the wraith sign to display a powerful diversion ability. From Yuan Yi's perspective, nothing was more tragic than a bottomless pit turning into two. This was the final straw that broke the camel's back. In the blink of an eye, the enormous essence energy that came from Yuan Yi was divided and consumed by the wraith sign and the Blood Soul Temple. The power was like a whale sucking in water. In the blink of an eye, not a single drop was left. Luo Nan had just obtained his immediate combat power, but it collapsed and dissolved like this. Not even a drop of blood existed. However, Luo Nan didn't have the time to lament at this critical juncture. Instead, he felt deeply fortunate. He immediately called out to the wraith sign, telling this damnable thing to quickly scram. Compared to the obvious target of the mushed-mouth ape, the human-faced arachnid that wandered on the mental plane escaped far too easily. It fled into the depths of the polar domain in the blink of an eye, leaving no traces behind. Gong Qi and Snake Tongue rushed to the scene a dozen seconds later. All they saw was the scattered wisps of cloud energy and the remnants of the mushed-mouth ape's essence energy that flooded the cloud world. Aside from this, there were no other traces that could be traced. In the real world, on the bed of a suite in the Shangding building, Luo Nan opened his eyes and stared straight at the ceiling. The joy of escaping with his life had already been erased. All that was left was the deep silence and restlessness of the bottom of a trench. Was he lucky? Lucky my ass. Gong Qi and Snake Tongue. His cloud world, the mystical place that his mother had used inconceivable methods to guide him to, had actually been invaded by these two. They had wantonly searched, polluting the purity of that place. They might even have destroyed the clues his mother had left behind. He could not allow it. He absolutely could not allow it. Under the effect of Luo Nan's emotions, the sealed system's large production line trembled. Cat Eyes, who had a closer relationship with him, sensed the abnormality and took the initiative to contact him. What's wrong? Luo Nan didn't respond. He didn't know how to respond. He just continued to struggle with himself. Even if he loathed and hated, reality was right there. Disregarding Snake Tongue, Gong Qi, who had somehow entered the cloud world, was a genuine extraordinary. His strength was robust beyond compare. With Luo Nan's ability, how should he deal with him? How should he expel or even exterminate him? Reason and emotions clashed. Restlessness and depression twisted together. It consumed nearly all of Luo Nan's mental strength. He could only search the system over and over again for the power that could be used. He made deductions in hopes of finding a way to deal with it. Luo Nan had experienced this sort of situation before when he had to deal with the dimensional crossbow. But he had to pay attention to this. Even if the formidable strength of an extraordinary lay before him, defending against it and exterminating it were two completely different concepts. His deductions reached a dead end time and time again. Then he had to start all over again. The sealed system was clearly a bit overheated, so much so that every member within felt a heavy pressure. Moreover, it accumulated layer upon layer, showing no signs of abating. When this pressure accumulated to a certain degree, the Star River scene embedded between reality and illusion underwent subtle yet general distortions and deformations. Cat Eyes could not help but transmit once more, "What the hell are you doing?" Luo Nan was disturbed. He had just furrowed his brows when a peculiar reaction cut in from the side of the system. Before he could truly realize what was going on, he sensed a hustle and bustle in the passageway outside the door. It was quite noisy. At this time reason slightly suppressed his emotions. He understood that the endless loop was not that easy to undo. He put on his clothes and got up after some thought. He opened the door and went out. He just so happened to bump into a staff member passing by the door. "What's going on?" "Oh, Boss Luo." The staff member recognized Luo Nan. He greeted him and said, "That young lady over there. She's the one you saved from the hands of Quantum Corporation. She went from a moderate coma to a light coma. In theory she can wake up at any time." Luo Nan loosened his hand and responded with a bit of a daze. "Really?" Luo Nan's domain spanned an enormous amount, causing him to be unable to react for a time. But Luo Nan followed the staff member forward under the drive of some marvelous sensation. They arrived at the corridor outside the 12th floor's monitoring room. He looked at the girl on the bed through the enormous glass wall. The girl lay there quietly. Her breathing was steady. All sorts of equipment were disregarded. It was as if she was sleeping soundly every day. Chapter 490. For now we don't know why we are special. For the time being, we will regard the unknown as our final destination. Thank the laws for allowing our souls to appear. We will be fettered in the end. Perhaps one day the answer will be clear and we are already on our way. The oppressive sound of the steam whistle pierced through the waves and the dust floating in the air. Before the first sound died away, another sound rang out. 3 consecutive sounds rang out. When the whistle died away, the ship made a large circle on the sea and headed back to shore. Luo Nan stood at the stern of the ship. He held onto the railing of the ship and looked calmly at the sea behind him. The ashes of the 2 ability users scattered in the wind amidst the great waves created by the opening of the propeller. They floated down, some rising and falling with the waves, and some being swallowed by the fish and shrimp behind them. Luo Nan's powerful mental senses stretched the length of his memories and filled them with far too many details that would make one's mood depressed. Luo Nan took a deep breath. His pure black suit was wrapped tightly around his body, making it a bit difficult for him to breathe. Did you know? Ability users can't be buried. Even if they are cremated, their ashes must be thrown into the sea. This is because none of us know whether or not we will be dug up by some madman in the next moment and sent to a laboratory. Zhang Yingying stood to the side, her elbows supporting the railing. She followed Luo Nan's example and looked at the sea surface that had been crushed by the propeller. Her posture was a bit lower and the topic she was talking about was very heavy. Yet her voice was bright and light as always. "Live well, lad." Luo Nan didn't turn his head. He didn't respond because he didn't know what expression to use at this time. Today's ceremony was a send-off for the 2 ability users who had been killed in the Municipal Plaza incident a few days ago. One was Charlie, who had been killed by Luo Yuan's parasite in the Shangding building. The other was the driver who had driven Luo Nan to the Ku Wang Communications building. In a strict sense, the deaths of these 2 people were inextricably linked to Luo Nan. Though no one mentioned this to him, he became aware of it when he put on his suit and stepped onto the ship. Awareness was one thing. His mood was another. Zhang Yingying came over to talk about this topic and his heart resisted it. Luckily the topic soon changed. Zhang Yingying talked about more practical things. The outsourcing business is complete. Trigate Security has already transferred the money. There are some financial and tax issues involved. The firm is still calculating it. But don't worry, I won't let you down. The amount is also quite considerable. Luo Nan responded without thinking. Such a topic was unable to attract his attention. Zhang Yingying could roughly guess his mood. She pursed her lips and didn't say anything else. She continued to lean against the railing and watch the sea with him. Time passed bit by bit. During this period there were people coming and going and some gazes were cast over from afar. Luo Nan knew, but he didn't want to worry about it. He didn't want to pay attention to it. The ship docked at the shore, and the guests who attended the funeral walked down the gangway one by one and shook hands with the relatives of the 2 victims. Luo Nan walked forward step by step within the stream of people, but his footsteps gradually faltered. Soon he fell behind by quite a bit. Zhang Yingying at the side clicked her tongue. She immediately grabbed his arm and led him forward with large strides. Luo Nan was brought to the side of the gangway before he could come back to his senses. Luo Nan's family members didn't react at all. They just shook hands with them in a stupefied manner. They brought along a child who wasn't much younger than Luo Nan to bow and express their thanks. Charlie had 2 children and the driver Tianlai also had one. Compared to the adults, these children's blank and stupefied states were truly unbearable for Luo Nan. His blood was about to congeal at this moment. He didn't come back to his senses all the way until he got off the ship. Zhang Yingying at the side acted like a good brother. She draped her arm over his shoulder in a familiar manner, pulling him along the dock. At the same time she whispered into his ear, "Don't always play the bitter type. Don't get yourself into a dead end. Everyone is doing this for work. It's just that the scope and nature of an ability user's business are more special. You can't be thinking that I'm comforting you, right? I just feel that there are far too many things related to human lives. Aren't you jealous? But that's right. Humans are damned social creatures. The death of a person is like digging a hole in the web of social relationships. The closer you get, the more awkward it gets. But if you can't get close to it, then don't force yourself to get close." Can't get close to it? Really can't get close to it? Just like Charlie. The other party clearly went for President Ouyang. Old Tian suffered a bit. Zhang Yingying was a practical person. She thought for a bit and said, "If you really feel bad, then put some money into the friendship fund. Do a targeted donation or something. It's much better than being sad and sorrowful here." Friendship fund? Luo Nan searched for related content on the Psychic Wave network. He discovered that this was a public welfare fund initiated by headquarters. Its main direction was to provide financial aid to society members or their family members who encountered special circumstances, ensuring their stable lives. Luo Nan's mind sensed something as he was looking up the information. He raised his head and saw Cat Eyes standing in front of him talking to Qin Yikuan. They were waiting for him to come over. Zhang Yingying saw them as well, but she still maintained the attitude of a good brother. She walked over with Luo Nan in a carefree manner. Today Cat Eyes wore a rare formal attire. She wore light makeup, appearing dignified and serious. It was just that her hanging left arm was rather eye-catching. She had been caught in the blast when the planar crossbow was unleashed. Her upper left arm was nearly blown off. Though she had received proper treatment, the shattered bones and flesh needed a period of time to grow back. Luo Nan and Cat Eyes had already greeted each other on the ship. The two had matters to discuss, so they agreed to travel together. Mr. Luo. Qin Yikuan was also dressed in pitch-black formal attire. He indicated to Luo Nan that the car was parked by the dock. Qin Yikuan was still responsible for Luo Nan's security work. However, as the situation escalated, the composition of the security team changed. He was no longer the captain. Instead, he existed as Luo Nan's personal bodyguard. God also made similar changes. Today was Saturday, November 26th. It had been exactly 7 days since the incident at the municipal plaza. Luo Nan did not attend class today, but he had matters to attend to at school. This was part of the planned itinerary, so the car was already prepared. Zhang Yingying giggled. "You don't mind if I hitch a ride, right? Take me to the cliffside section of the Huanhai Highway. It's very fast. It's only 2 steps away." Cat Eyes turned her gaze to look at the two with their arms around each other's shoulders. Her gaze then fell on Zhang Yingying's face. "You're going to the bottom of the sea to train in seclusion again? You're getting more and more desperate." "Sister Cat Eyes." Zhang Yingying released her arm from Luo Nan's neck. She walked forward and hugged Cat Eyes lightly. She giggled. "I'm the one who cherishes my life. I can tell from your appearance that you're going straight to the gates of hell, not cultivating for 3 days. I think it's more like, someone is by my side but I'm going to the gates of hell. If you cherish your life, shouldn't you stay far away from someone?" The two were friends who played the wilderness game together. Their friendship was quite good and they often contacted each other. They spoke very casually. A certain someone who was unjustly implicated felt even more stifled. He immediately got into the car. Gouda was in the driver's seat. Under normal circumstances, Qin Yikuan and Luo Nan should be sitting together in the back. It would be convenient for them to deal with dangerous situations. But Zhang Yingying sat next to Luo Nan when the car door opened. She even stretched comfortably. The bulletproof SUV really did have this amount of space. Qin Yikuan could only get into the car from the other side, squeezing Luo Nan in the center. Cat Eyes was already annoyed with a certain someone. She happily sat in the front passenger seat. It was spacious and clean. The car started and Zhang Yingying moved closer to Luo Nan and whispered into his ear, "You've been quite familiar with Cat Eyes lately. You want to take advantage of her?" Oh, I'm asking for advice. Luo Nan was very familiar with lying. Zhang Yingying sneered. What advice? All-encompassing perception? She stuck out her tongue after speaking, apologizing to Cat Eyes. Cat Eyes didn't care at all. I don't have all-encompassing perception, but long-range perception is quite decent. I just learned the dripping sword. If I can use it to achieve long-range killing, then it will be more suitable for my path. What do you mean I know? I don't know. Zhang Yingying curled her lips. After pulling business for you, I practiced holding my breath at the bottom of the sea. In the end, as soon as I emerged, I heard that a certain someone provoked an extraordinary. He nearly blew up hundreds of thousands of people in the municipal plaza into the sky. Cat Eyes raised her injured arm from the front passenger seat. Personal experience. Priceless advice. She was referring to the earlier part about the gates of hell. Luo Nan's face twitched and he didn't utter a word. On the other side, Qin Yikuan couldn't help but speak up. This matter doesn't have much to do with Mr. Luo. In the end, the enemy is just using Mr. Luo to draw attention. Their target is still President Ouyang. But even the president has times when he can't take care of everyone. When immortals fight, mortals suffer. Zhang Yingying's conclusion hit the nail on the head. Frankly speaking, if you think they died because of you, then that means you believe yourself to be an extraordinary immortal. The world revolves around you. Arrogance is the real problem. Get lost. Luo Nan finally couldn't hold back from retorting. Zhang Yingying laughed heartily. She was the same as a certain someone in the front passenger seat. They both had sharp tongues and were used to tearing at people's faces. However, she was an elderly person who was truly an optimist. She hoped that the people beside her would be happy with her. Zhang Yingying knocked on the car window amidst her laughter. Thanks for giving me a ride. Just stop here. Right now, my place is truly a humble dwelling water cage. I won't be inviting you to be my guest. The car stopped, and Zhang Yingying bluntly used the back of her hand to pat Luo Nan's cheek. She was full of teasing. Boss Luo. Wait until you truly become an immortal before you think about those boring things. She jumped out of the car laughing and giggling the moment she succeeded. She leaped over the railing and fell towards the sea below the cliff that was dozens of meters high. The waves shook violently, producing a muffled sound. Speaking of which, the white rainbow aura on her body had truly grown fiercer and fiercer. It had practically affected the appearance of her normal life aura. Presumably, she needed to seriously polish her control over it. The car started up once more. Luo Nan's thoughts turned and returned to himself. He didn't want to be coy and pretentious. He didn't want to be a sour and rotten idiot who said, "It's all my fault." He also didn't feel that he was truly above the majority of people. Oh, perhaps there was already a bit of an omen. But let's not talk about anything else. Right now, there was a fatal obstacle waiting for him in front of him. It was an obstacle that he could not cross. How could he have the qualifications to do so? Luo Nan's mind gradually became clear. Perhaps today's gloomy mood was more due to the root of the illness from the pressure of the past few days. He could forget about having a good day as long as the pressure wasn't removed. Chapter 491. Though Zhang Yingying's words had no head or tail, she still remembered to leave a link for Luo Nan. Luo Nan was still muddle-headed. He instinctively clicked on the link and jumped to the page. After the network space refreshed, he was greeted with a title. A morning of practice in exchange for rain. What was this inexplicable? These words and the accompanying picture looked familiar. The picture Luo Nan saw was of a quilt drying in the sun. The color was quite plain and there were no patterns on it. Therefore he could clearly see a circle of watermarks on the quilt, forming a human shape. At first glance, the title and the picture had no head or tail, but when Luo Nan came to his senses he immediately understood the situation involved. How could he not understand? Wasn't this title and this picture the elementary results he had posted to headquarters' website at the beginning of the month? He remembered that he had practiced with the condensation ring for half an afternoon, accumulating a large amount of water droplets. He exploded and wet his bedding. He thought it was interesting, so he posted a picture online to reply to Her Majesty Empress Wu's post about the dripping sword. It could be considered a record of his own cultivation, and it could be considered as encouragement to those on the same path. Luo Nan had jumped to headquarters' website at this time, and his account was automatically connected. The information that had been accumulating for many days surged up, and a continuous notification sound rang out. Luonan looked at the number prompt and saw that it was already 99 plus. He clicked to clear it and it quickly grew. It was almost full. What was going on? From Luonan's impression, the title of this reply was quite ordinary. It was inconspicuous among the tens of thousands of replies. It had always been cold and cheerless. Many days had passed since then. Luonan had pretty much forgotten about it, but it suddenly became a hot topic. It was something good. This reply was pushed to the top of the post, and the lighting effects were extremely prominent. Though Luonan wasn't in a good mood, he couldn't help but feel a bit of vanity and joy when he saw his post explode. However, this rare good mood was choked back when he saw the first quoted reply. This reply was full of gunpowder. Judging by the looks of it, people who use a watering can when their D*ck is small are shameful. It looked like the source of the watering can man was here. There was also the summer spray. Judging by the momentum, it probably wasn't a good word. The person who replied was not anonymous. His ID was R, and he was verified to be an explorer directly under the headquarters. Below, someone quoted the reply. The human shape on the blanket is very obvious, and it can also be seen that it is a very light mist. These small details are very convincing. Looking at the reply time, it had been 4 days ago on Tuesday. Or had been online the whole time. She quickly replied, Xiaochui's vanity can't be cured. A spray bottle is enough. It was this kind of straightforward sarcasm and attack that attracted more attention. From there, his popularity increased rapidly, and the frequency of replies increased as well. Someone spoke objectively with facts. I've just awakened and the association's certification is C level. Tell me the number. I gave it a try just now. The complete water drop sword is too strenuous. The condensation ring alone is fine, but maintaining it is too difficult. The maximum number of condensation rings was 7, which was the level of bedwetting, and it was still at the level of a baby. Right now, the world is spinning, and the above is what I said with my eyes closed. Same, close your eyes and dictate. The limit is 12. Infants have passed, but not yet. Several consecutive experimental data didn't support Luonan. Moreover, there was even a data emperor who came out to ridicule him. He unleashed a barrage of attacks. Based on the maximum diameter of the water droplets gathered by the condensation ring, one water droplet contains approximately 0.5 milliliters of water. 12 water droplets, 6 milliliters of water. Even at the baby level, this is a symptom of oliguria. Luonan wasn't angry at this time. He just couldn't help but want to laugh. Just how free were these people? And Ari jumped out at this time. This time he brought a complete video. He appeared on camera in person. I personally tested it. 91 in half an hour. If I keep this up, I'll be in trouble. This is a preschool level, right? Everyone knows my level, so I won't say much. Welcome to the new Xia City B+ rank powerhouse who has been registered for a month. Show us the ultimate skill of the spray bottle. Ari looked like he was in his 30s. He had a square face and thick eyebrows. He had thin eyes and thin lips. He looked very sharp. Luonan looked at Re's registration information. This guy was the more active and open type on the internet. He didn't mind information being leaked at all. He had all sorts of information. From the information, he could be considered a veteran. He had been registered for 12 years. His combat strength had reached the B rank. He belonged to the architect level. He could be considered a core power in the society. Not to mention anything else, he was able to simultaneously control 91 condensation rings and maintain their consumption. This was something that ordinary ability users couldn't do. He was worthy of the architect level. Replies and likes flowed in an endless stream below the video for a time. More and more people followed suit. It was impossible for this type of post to not be popular once it became a trend. The densely packed replies were mostly a stage for self-demonstration. Some of them increased the number of water droplets and announced their abilities. There were also some who showed off 1 or 2 droplets. Among them was an ID called Gao Tianmeng. He gave Luonan an extremely deep impression. He also uploaded a video. The real person didn't appear, but the room was densely packed with water droplets. There were at least 200 to 300 of them. Every droplet was perfectly round and full. They exploded at the same time, instantly filling the air with water mist. At the same time, he added a grim emoji. Some people are completely ignorant of the power of the mental side. This person was even more amazing. He clearly stood on Luonan's side. Many people gasped in admiration at the moment, but there were also people who used their status to say, "Senior people doing this. Are you trying to set a counterexample?" It didn't take long for Ari to reply. Her tone was full of sarcasm. "Don't you have any shame helping your underlings blow water? You Gao Tianshi can stand and pee, but that doesn't mean that everyone in Xia City is a man. Hehe, I still need to congratulate you guys for producing a newly registered B-rank power, the watering pot man. Oh, he's not just a newly registered anymore. It's been almost 2 months. He's already a senior Xia watering pot man, Gao Tianshi. Gao Tianshi?" Luonan guessed that the person who stood up for him should be the B-rank power of Xia City, the heavenly master Gao Meng. He was also the deputy chief commander of the branch during the municipal plaza incident. It was just that Gao Meng's reply was a bit lonely in the middle of a large number of posts. This caused a group of people led by Ari to attack him. From this point on, the direction of the posts changed subtly. Some people used the society's ability user level settings to classify the videos displayed over the past few days. From the awakened to the architect, from the C to the B+, they were roughly divided into 6 levels. Each level had a standard number of condensation rings. Then they pulled people from all over to appraise them. It was as if the level of one's ability wasn't qualified if they didn't verify it. Later on, Luonan's first reply was a bit like he had been hung up and beaten. Some busybodies estimated the number of condensation rings Luonan needed to wet his quilt. They set the number at 300 half-truthfully. From then on, they listed it as a standard unit, calling it a watering pot. Then there were things like C-rank psychic ability, which was equal to 1/15 of a watering pot. B-rank psychic ability, which was equal to 0.7 watering pot. Later on, they probably felt that the unit of watering pot was too complicated. Through Ari's suggestion, they simplified it to blow. It was a step down from Xia watering pot. What was Xia watering pot? Luonan didn't quite understand the explanation. He could only give Zhang Yingying the same dumbstruck expression. So the internet of the inner world is also like this. I just sent a picture. Zhang Yingying replied in an instant. It really is you. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Send a video back. What are you talking about? If this was 2 or 3 weeks ago, he really might have refuted a few times. But today he was already paying more attention to the level of the soul cloak when it came to the technique of the dripping sword. He was paying more attention to the interference scene, the deep sea world and the like. He had long since lost the thought of simply stacking the numbers. What else was there to say to this group of people? If you don't want to go, then I'll go. These grandsons are too infuriating. Cat Eyes is here right now. I'll have her take a video and upload it. Alright, how's the level of your dripping sword? Don't overreach yourself. How about this? I'll immediately contact Her Majesty and have her give you special treatment. Should I refuse? Cat Eyes turned her head from the front passenger seat at this time. So it's you, watering pot guy. You have a head but no tail. You really do give our Xia City a lot of face. Mr. Luo is watering pot guy? Qin Ikun was shocked to the side. Even God, who was driving the car, was paying attention. Only now did Luonan discover that the influence of this absurd hot topic on the internet was quite extraordinary. Is this important? People have come knocking on our door. You tell me if it's important or not. Let's put it this way. I'm a C-rank psychic ability user. Then you say that my ability is 0.1. Is it okay if I beat you up? Xia City's blowing pot guy is referring to Xia City's blowing pot guy. Don't you see that the people who are using this unit are all well-known figures of Xia City? Aside from President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu, who don't dare provoke them, everyone else has a price tag. There were tens of thousands of replies. Luonan couldn't flip through them all in a short amount of time. He only noticed that there really was such a reply after Cat Eye's reminder. It listed Old Man Yu, Mr. Bai, Gao Meng, Horned Demon, and other B-rank powerhouses of Xia City. There were also some C-rank backbone powers. All of them were arranged into a list, using the blowing pot guy standard one by one. Even fleshly bodies like Giant Arm and Cragburst were inexplicably converted. They were grandly displayed on the list. For a time his eyes were filled with words like 1 blowing pot guy, 2 blowing pots, 0 point blowing pots, and so on. Afterwards, Ari's expression became even more arrogant. I welcome watering pot guy to come and clear his name. At the very least, you should post a video like Teacher Gao. We can adjust the standard according to reality. If you really can do it, then I'll kneel. Of course, if Her Majesty Empress Wu personally comes, then I'll kneel and lick her. Otherwise, please come out and slap yourself in the face. Xia City has been bragging for all these years. My bladder is about to explode. It's nothing if I explode a little. Chapter 492. What do you think, boss? How does it feel to be the fuse? I feel like this nickname is much better than the watering can man. Luo Nan found it inconceivable. It's such an obvious attack. Super doesn't care? Cat eyes sneered. Isn't regional killing normal in this era of isolated cities? Headquarters has few people to do things, but there are many things to do. It's only logical that they can't manage it all. I understand. Luo Nan still remembered what Bamboo Pole had said during the supplementary lessons. Xia City had a clear atmosphere due to Ouyang Chen's existence over the past few years. There was also the establishment of the psychic wave network, and there were special resources in the outer wilderness area. Xia City was at the apex of the various branches. The number of registered and resident awakened and above characters had always exceeded 1,000 for many years, exceeding the average by nearly 50%. And the rise of Her Majesty Empress Wu catalyzed this advantage, causing Xia City's status to become more and more special. Faced with this situation, other cities, especially headquarters, had a popular saying: the Xia City branch had independent tendencies. They could separate from headquarters at any time, start their own furnace and seize resources. Even if there's a regional conflict, why does it seem like Ari has a grudge against me for killing his father? Things like public opinion have always listened to whoever has the loudest voice. Plus, some people have a strange imagination. They can nitpick and find a good entry point. Naturally, they can seize the opportunity to cause trouble. As for Ari's unforgiving attitude, it's understandable. He's the disciple of Old Man Gong. Who? Gong Qi is the proud disciple of Deputy Secretary General Gong. He himself comes from a family of cultivators. It's said that before the age of distortion, his family was a famous family of spirit cultivators. They were proficient in black witchcraft. Right now, his father holds a position in several research funds of the society. He has a deep friendship with Gong Qi. Qin Ikuan had heard of this person before. Ari is the candidate for the head of the Law Mo family. 10 years ago, she killed a target with a curse from 1,000 miles away. She became famous in one fell swoop. She and Snake Tongue are known as the Dark Witch Duo. Luo Nan raised his eyebrows as he listened to the information, but he didn't say anything. He just leaned back and looked at the roof of the off-road vehicle, deep in thought. Cat eyes twisted her body and stared at him with interest to see his reaction. Do you think that the water inside is very deep? Speaking of which, last time Gong Qi was in Xia City, he was given the cold shoulder. I heard that he went into seclusion after he returned and hasn't appeared in public since. The corner of Luo Nan's eye jumped. The information Cat Eyes spoke of was actually the information he had requested her to gather a few days ago. Today was the day to sort out and summarize the information. Who would have thought that this person would take the opportunity to say it out loud? Qin Ikuan followed and said, Mr. Luo, Cat Eyes is right. Ari's attack came out of the blue. Their choice of target and timing are all questionable. There's also the dripping sword. The people in the car had personally experienced the battle a week ago. They had more or less experienced Luo Nan's attainments in the dripping sword. No matter how good Luo Nan was, he definitely wouldn't be as bad as Ari said. Someone's setting the tempo, right? That's right. That's why Mr. Gao appeared in the middle to correct the direction, but those people circled back. Cat Eyes and Qin Ikun continued their discussion. They both felt that Luo Nan shouldn't reveal himself so easily. But at the same time, Zhang Yingying incited him again and again. Perhaps Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't agree to her preposterous request, so she simply played a roundabout way to save the country. She sent over all of Her Majesty Empress Wu's teaching materials and lecture materials related to the dripping sword over the past 2 years. There were even some internal training videos from the firm. It was far more comprehensive than what Papercut had provided. Luo Nan didn't have a clear response to this. Whether it was Cat Eyes and Qin Ikuan's cautiousness style or Zhang Yingying's direct supply style, they only circled his mind. They didn't have any effect. Luo Nan had his own thoughts and goals. Everything else had to serve his goals. No matter what sort of goal Re held, no matter what methods she used, Luo Nan wouldn't dance to her rhythm. unless it would help Luonan accomplish his goals. At this point Luonan closed his eyes. He sank the influence of the information on the ship and the car one by one, allowing his mind to return to tranquility. Only in this way could he have enough concentration to ponder over relevant problems. The off-road car entered the magnetic rail highway and sped all the way to Acumen College. Since it was the weekend, their group of people parked their car in a nearby parking lot. They walked into the campus and arrived at the gear building on the north shore. Cat Eyes, come with me. Brother Qin, Brother Gao, you guys do as you please. Arriving at gear was tantamount to arriving at their own home. Luonan didn't stand on ceremony. He led Cat Eyes upstairs to the viewing room on the 4th floor. They just so happened to converge with the sunlight shining in. Luonan squinted his eyes as he sat on the floor illuminated by the sunlight. The warm light was very comfortable, but his thoughts flowed back and forth in his mind, never stopping for a moment. Cat Eyes sat by his side. She picked up an antique hand-cranked bean grinder and poured in coffee beans. He casually ground them and played with them. Her mouth was unforgiving. You're really quite gloomy right now. Am I? Your thoughts are crafty and your schemes are hard to fathom. If you're not gloomy, then what is? Boss, are you preparing to become an evil god? Don't say such unreliable words. Okay, say something reliable. Why do you have ideas about Gongqi? Is it that obvious? If it's a bit more obvious, Qin Ikuan and Gouda can probably just report it. You can't really believe that the person who released the dimensional crossbow is related to Gongqi, right? If you think this way, what kind of brain circuitry do you have? If that old man really had this kind of ability, he would have been the president of headquarters a long time ago. He wouldn't have been holed up in the position of Deputy Secretary General for so many years. You've already told me your reasons. What are you worried about? I'm not worried. I'm just unhappy that I'm doing stupid things with a certain someone. Hey, are you really going to sleep? Luonan didn't pay any more attention to Cat Eyes. Cat Eyes' role here was very simple, aside from intelligence gathering. She was there to help him cover up and let him do things calmly. Otherwise, with Qin Ikuan and Gouda right in front of him, it would be quite awkward if they saw anything. The side effect of doing this was that a few bad rumors would spread. Qin Ikuan and Gouda's mouths were tight, but Luonan and Cat Eyes had been traveling together in the same car and staying in the same room during this period of time. They were overly close and it was truly eye-catching. Why would the two bodyguards need to spread the news? Cat Eyes had asked earlier, but Luonan would often close his eyes and pretend to be asleep. What in the world was he up to? She was too lazy to ask later. She didn't care about her reputation. It was useless even if she cared. While Luonan's mind was wandering, she was grinding coffee, reading books and so on. She looked extremely idle and bored, but she was actually using these small actions to adapt to the new changes in her body. The feedback power of Luonan's sealed system grew stronger and stronger during this period of time, causing her soul strength to grow by an even greater margin. The range of her all-encompassing senses easily broke through 100 meters. The effects of her long-range perception were even more profound. She needed to carefully recuperate. How Cat Eyes would deal with the rumors and slanders and recuperate her mental state was not a topic Luonan was concerned with. His consciousness entered the cloud world a mere second after he closed his eyes. Luonan's control over the cloud world was growing stronger and stronger. He just needed to shift his mind to the Wraith sign and he could use it as a springboard. He could see the vast area covered by the soul cloak in his eyes. This sort of simple observation was simple and safe. Could be done at any time and any place. But today he specifically called Cat Eyes over to act as a cover. There was an extremely important node that required special attention. When Luonan's consciousness shifted over, there just so happened to be a mushed-mouth ape. Its body collapsed amidst a mournful shriek. It converged into a mass of bloody light and was completely devoured by the Wraith sign. At first glance, this scene was simply a replay of the pitiful Yuan Yi from a week ago. But on a deeper level, the Wraith sign was already disdainful of the mushed-mouth ape's abundant essence energy. What truly needed this essence energy was the Blood Soul Temple that was established within the Wraith sign's body. At this very moment, lava flowed atop the rocky mountain of the Blood Soul Temple. At first glance, the lava flowed along the mountain's terrain, meandering and diverging. But upon closer inspection, one would discover that the flow of lava did not flow according to the mountain's terrain at all. Instead, it was driven by some sort of power. The lava flowed against the will of the heart as it shuttled up and down. Looking at it for a long time, it was simply like the flow of the blood and energy of the human body. It endowed this ugly and majestic mountain with a bewitching vitality. However, today's focus was still on the very peak of the mountain. There was the final structure atop the mountain. It was an enormous altar that covered the entire peak. It was piled up and built within the bloody light. This represented the completion of the 2000th step of the Blood Soul Temple, the 5th stage of the Blood Soul Temple. This was not a simple matter. The remaining several hundred steps of the Blood Soul Temple were completely formed from the essence energy of the mushed-mouth apes that ran amok in the cloud world. Counting the numbers, Luo Nan was able to observe that the Wraith Sign had hunted at least 4 mushed-mouth apes of various sizes this week. It must be known that these valiant demons possessed combat strength equivalent to a B-rank powerhouse. Even if they were lacking in intelligence, their bodies were enormous. They were proficient in flight and their speed was astonishing. They could attack the mental and material planes at the same time. All of these things were enough to make up for their lack of intelligence. Therefore, killing 4 mushed-mouth apes was equivalent to killing 4 B-rank powerhouses. If it wasn't for the Wraith Sign's natural ability to restrain the mushed-mouth apes, and if it wasn't for the fact that the Wraith Sign had evolved after devouring Yuan Yi's essence energy, greatly increasing its hunting and devouring abilities. If it wasn't for Luo Nan's soul cloak that covered a vast area of several thousand kilometers, allowing him to completely control information and intelligence, accomplishing this in a short week would simply be a fantasy story. Even though it was completed now, Luo Nan still felt that it was somewhat unrealistic. But no matter what, the completion of the Blood Soul Temple was already an established fact. Luo Nan looked at the 6-layered altar atop the mountain peak. The bloody light flowed upon the altar, stretching out a rigorous structure and engraving abstract designs. This was an eye-opener for Luo Nan, but he was also very baffled. Where in the world did this technique come from? Chapter 493. In Luo Nan's eyes, the Wraith Sign's body had already formed its own space and time. There was a boundary of primal chaos in the middle that accommodated the growth and transformation of the Blood Soul Temple. It was extremely mystical. However, the Blood Soul Temple's power clearly increased by a large margin after the altar took form. This power quickly manifested itself outside. The entire mountain released a boundless bloody light that bombarded the surrounding primal chaos. The Blood Soul Temple was undoubtedly fighting over territory with the Wraith Sign, which bore it. However, the Wraith Sign's control over the Blood Soul Temple did not decrease. Instead, it increased. The surrounding primal chaos remained majestically unmoved despite the 10,000 streaks of bloody light. It easily digested the countercharge of the Blood Soul Temple. This kind of control, Luo Nan was a bit pleasantly surprised. The Wraith Sign had indeed advanced a step earlier. The mushed-mouth ape he had hunted before had more or less manifested the growth of his combat power. But in essence, he still had to look at the hierarchical structure of the order frame. Though the Wraith Sign's origins were mysterious, it was hard for Luo Nan to distinguish who was stronger and who was weaker when compared to the similarly unfathomable Blood Soul Temple. This was especially true after both of them advanced. It was even harder to judge. Luo Nan was finally able to confirm that the Wraith Sign was indeed on the level of the order frame, firmly suppressing the Blood Soul Temple by a head. Both sides had advanced, but the gap between the two had not shrunk. Instead, it had increased a step further. However, Luo Nan was unable to tell just how much more ability the Wraith Sign had gained after its advancement. After all, Luo Nan was limited by the monotonous living environment of the cloud world, and he had not encountered any powerful enemies. Luo Nan was not crazy enough to go against Gong Qifeng with the Wraith Sign. Luo Nan's thoughts circled around a few times. The Blood Soul Temple's 10,000 streaks of bloody light continued for a few rounds. In the end, it was to no avail. In the end, Luo Nan calmed down and used more of the energy obtained from the formation of the altar on his own body. According to the information revealed by the Blood Flame Order, the construction of the 2,000 steps of the Blood Fire Path had been completed. The entire structure of the path had been constructed. The remaining 120 steps, the 6th stage, would be an internalized upgrade of the entire Blood Soul Temple. Luo Nan could not tell if it was internalized or not, but he could see that the bloody light was absorbed by the internal structure of the Blood Soul Temple. The internal structure of the Blood Soul Temple was different. Of the 5 internal structures, the stone forest at the bottom was the place where impurities were gathered and converted. The magma formed a lake and the total amount of bloody light was the most. However, it was constantly changing and it did not accumulate. The courtyard garden on the 2nd floor was where the shepherd marks were stored. There were originally 4 marks. Rin Hong's mark had been forcefully pulled out of the Blood Soul Temple by Luo Nan using the heavily chained crow. The mark had died from the backlash. The remaining 3 marks were left behind by Lady Halder Yin Lu and the deceased Mo Lun. At that moment the sanguine light in the garden was like a veil or fog. It was dense but not dense. They arrived at the 3rd layer of the structure, which was a cave built next to the mountain. There was no doubt that this was where most of the bloody light was gathered, so much so that the internalized bloody light simply couldn't go up when it reached this area. It was congested and filled up, forming waves of blood that pushed all the way up until it was overflowing. It was only then that the blood light regained its mobility and surged toward the 4th floor and the altar at the top. Luo Nan stopped looking at the structure above him. He focused his attention on the inside of the cave. It was called a grotto because the structure of this place was somewhat similar to the grottos of ancient Eastern Buddhism. Especially in the depths of the grotto, there were some blurry stone structures carved out of the mountain. Each and every one of them was muddled and faceless. Even their figures weren't very clear. But after the blood light internalized, the internal structure of the grotto clearly deformed. The blurry outlines of the stone statues began to protrude under the wash of the bloody light. Numerous cracks appeared on the surface, and an even thicker amount of bloody magma seeped out from the cracks. The magma began to reshape the stone statues once more. A few seconds later, a clear outline of a stone structure appeared in a corner of the grotto. It was like the chisel of a skilled craftsman. It wasn't lifelike, but it had both form and spirit. So Luo Nan was able to recognize it with a single glance. The mushed-mouth ape. Before Luo Nan could figure out what was going on, one of the 4 shepherd marks floating in the courtyard garden was suddenly pulled by an incorporeal force. It was pulled out from the structure of the garden. It followed the flow of the bloody light and rose step by step. Soon it reached the 3rd floor of the grotto. The shepherd mark was pulled up by a dense tide of bloody light. It was forcefully slapped into the outline of a stone statue. In an instant, bloody magma erupted from within. Cracks grew everywhere and the grotto trembled. In just a few seconds, another clear stone statue condensed in front of the mushed-mouth ape statue. It also had both form and spirit. Its entire body was that of a middle-aged man in his 50s or 60s. His appearance was haggard, but his posture was upright. Even though he was outlined by the mountain rocks, his facial features and expression possessed a fierce momentum. The bloody light lingered around the stone statue. It was a mixture of light and darkness. The light and shadow were unfathomable. Luo Nan's consciousness paused a bit before he dared to confirm. Mo Lun, a senior elder of the Blood Flame Order who had fought Tian Bang, the super burner who was closest to being extraordinary, with his mysterious and unpredictable soul body of black smoke. Mo Lun, who had died many days ago. Luo Nan's consciousness remained within the grotto. It shuttled in and out, unwilling to leave. The stone statues weren't living people, but at this moment he could clearly feel a life force that was leaping and ready to move. This life force seeped out from the 2 stone statues. Of course, it was a bit different from a living person. Its order was much worse. It was more direct, more violent, and more destructive. This was most likely a mutation of the Blood Soul Temple's power. However, the most marvelous thing was that the 2 stone statues both originated from the Blood Soul Temple's power. There was a clear difference between the 2 statues. Not only did this grotto sculpt statues of Mo Lun and the mushed-mouth ape, it also faithfully reflected the differences between the 2. From form to spirit, it touched upon various planes. It was truly inconceivable. Luo Nan's consciousness wandered about the grotto. It went back and forth over and over again. The more he experienced the subtle differences, the more he felt that there were some extremely profound truths within. It was to the extent that his mind unconsciously transmitted other thoughts. Such a mystical sculpting of the stone statue. Such a detailed reproduction of the aura. It couldn't be that it was just for people to admire, right? As a sacrificial tool of an order, it should have some more practical functions. Unfortunately, the people of the Blood Flame Order had already fled to D City, which was over 10,000 kilometers away. The wraith sign that bore the Blood Soul Temple didn't possess any intelligence. Luonan couldn't find someone to ask, so he could only ponder blindly. His consciousness circled around the grotto again and again, probing layer by layer. Occasionally he would use his telepathic thoughts to issue an order or something, but it was all to no avail. Could it be that he needed to chant an incantation or form a hand seal? If he needed the so-called secret technique of the Blood Flame Order, then things would be awkward. Luonan circled a few times, but he was unable to grasp the gist of it. He could only suppress the doubts in his mind and shift his consciousness away from this place. Right now, the Blood Soul Temple was very focused on internalizing the power of the bloody light into its entire structure. However, there were no signs of the final 120 steps of the Blood Flame path. Actually, according to the Blood Flame Order's plan, the Blood Soul Temple, which had already completed 5 stages, should have seized the Wraith sign long ago and become a part of the sacrificial tool. Just like Ren Hong, who had already died a clean death. He probably didn't understand why the Blood Soul Temple wasn't able to devour the human-faced arachnid, losing their best opportunity. When all was said and done, the Wraith sign had devoured the Blood Flame Order's mold, the human-faced arachnid. This result was destined. Hold on. According to this, there should be a difference between the current form of the Blood Soul Temple and the sacrificial tool. It was inside the Wraith sign's stomach, completely cut off from the outside world. It only relied on the essence energy that the Wraith sign provided to it to survive. Luonan didn't know what kind of effect this difference would have, but perhaps... should he try to spit this thing out? He definitely couldn't spit it all out. Who knew if he could control it? But if he could just externalize a portion of the Blood Soul Temple's power, it would be good to see the light and shadow effects. Luonan had long since been unable to restrain the curiosity in his heart. He tried to send an order to the Wraith sign. But then he felt that this order might be a bit complicated for the Wraith sign's intelligence. Luonan was pondering over how to simplify the order when the Wraith sign's ugly mouth suddenly opened wide and its chelicerae vibrated. A ball of red light rapidly accumulated and expanded within the deep hole of the gloomy mouth. It filled the entire mouth in the blink of an eye, but it didn't shoot out in the first instance. Instead, it was like a charging laser cannon. It continued to accumulate power. The power contained within the red light originated from the Blood Soul Temple. Luonan didn't know how the Wraith sign did it, but it was able to easily divide this rebellious and untamed power and accumulate it layer by layer. Luonan held his breath and calmed his mind, watching what the Wraith sign was going to do next. Perhaps a second passed or perhaps a bit longer, but the soul cloak floating in the cloud world suddenly trembled. The range was small, but it gathered all the movements within a range of several thousand kilometers. The environment was relatively monotonous. Although the range was wide, the amount of information wasn't great. Luonan quickly grasped the most valuable part of the information. Within the range of the cloak, there were the locations of the 47 mushed-mouth apes, the intensity of their power and the relationship between their senses. And at this time, Luonan clearly sensed that the Wraith sign was aiming the accumulated red light within its mouth at the ape that was the least connected to the others. Target, mushed-mouth ape X. Distance, 1,723 kilometers. The energy was still accumulating, but the target didn't change. Was it really a laser cannon? Looking at the detection distance, it could be said to be a rail cannon, but could it reach that far? The red light within the Wraith sign's mouth fired out noiselessly as Luonan's thoughts ran wild. From the perspective of Luonan, a psychic ability tester, this was an extremely spectacular scene. The surging power of an unfathomable nature pierced straight down from the depths of the mental plane. It instantly pierced through thousands upon thousands of mental curtains and rapidly approached the material plane. It began to interfere with the environment of the target area. The unfortunate mushed-mouth ape, who was the target of the experiment, sensed it the moment the red light pierced through the polar domain, but it was already too late. The red light fell, and it was as if a rocky and lofty mountain peak was instantly pressed down on that area. The outline of the Blood Soul Temple was faintly visible. Chapter 494. Really was a railgun. But it wasn't just a railgun. This scene made Luonan think of the dimensional crossbow that had put him in a difficult situation. At first glance, the firing form was far too similar. However, according to the follow-up research materials, The dimensional crossbow used by the self-proclaimed Luo Yuan had a foundation similar to the space-time fault of the logic realm. Moreover, it had an extremely powerful interference force towards the real world and the logic realm's extraordinary domain. It seemed to have a special operating mechanism. Luo Nan's level of understanding was no longer sufficient when it came to this sort of deep theory. He didn't think any further. He continued to look at the situation in the area hit by the railgun. The red light contained an extremely powerful force. It dealt fatal damage to the target, the mushed-mouth ape. But this destructive force was different from the destructive impact brought by the dimensional crossbow. Luo Nan gazed at the Blood Soul Temple rising into the sky amidst the red and bloody light. This was an interference scene that seemed both real and illusory. Ultimately, this was the sufficient interference of the order framework of the Blood Soul Temple towards the mushed-mouth ape. Or it could be said that the terrifying force catalyzed the forced transformation and deconstruction of the target. But there was more to come. The scene of the Blood Soul Temple appeared for a total of 10 seconds before fading away. But the permeating red and bloody light grew more and more concentrated. It coiled and squirmed within the empty cloudy void. It was like red-hot molten steel turning and taking shape within an invisible mold. When the scene of the Blood Soul Temple faded away completely, what remained in that area was still the mushed-mouth ape. Its figure seemed to have shrunk by 2 sizes. It was only around 3 meters tall. Its body was curled up into a ball. It looked to be in a daze. The Wraith Sign didn't know what embarrassment was. But for a moment, Luo Nan felt a similar emotion, but it soon dissipated. The interference scene wouldn't lie. The process of the mushed-mouth ape's transformation and deconstruction was clearly left in Luo Nan's sensory memories. There was absolutely no falsehood. Then, Luo Nan calmed his mind a bit. He shifted his thoughts through the soul cloak and carefully observed the details of the target. Then he discovered that the aura of the mushed-mouth ape he was paying attention to had a clear change from when he locked onto it earlier. The auras of the mushed-mouth ape were different from each other. It was similar to the difference between humans. Most importantly, this aura had become extremely familiar. Even though its body was curled up, the target, the mushed-mouth ape, was still surrounded by a powerful and violent life force. However, it lacked the order that a life should have, and the internal conflicts were about to be resolved. But if one looked closely, this violent vitality had temporarily achieved a dynamic balance under a certain formless framework that was more orderly. Luo Nan's heart thumped. He separated a portion of his mind and entered the Wraith Sign's body. He locked onto the grotto region within the structure of the Blood Soul Temple. That's right. This is the place. It gives off the exact same feeling as the 2 stone statues in the grotto. Interesting. Several thoughts flashed through Luo Nan's mind in quick succession. In the end, he executed an order through his soul cloak to his target, the mushed-mouth ape. Come here. The curled-up body of this mushed-mouth ape, which was now 2 sizes smaller, shrank once more without any delay. It actually transformed into a beam of bloody light that soared to the sky. It charged madly in the direction that Luo Nan commanded it to go. A normal mushed-mouth ape's flying speed was as fast as lightning, like a flying phantom. As for this mushed-mouth ape, it transformed into a bloody light and tore through the clouds. Speed was several times faster. In less than 3 minutes, this small and exquisite mushed-mouth ape had already traversed the distance of 1,700 kilometers. It arrived beneath the cloud layer where the Wraith Sign resided. The extreme movement turned into extreme stillness in an instant. Only the aftermath of the impact from the splitting space still swept through the clouds, rumbling and echoing. 1,700 kilometers in 3 minutes. It was close to 30 times the speed of sound. The speed of this mushed-mouth ape was comparable to a high-powered electromagnetic gun. He'd chase the wind and move like lightning. Seriously. A few minutes ago, Luo Nan never expected that the power of the Blood Soul Temple would surge outward and form an interference scene. In the end, it created a novice level for him. This clearly had something to do with the changes in the grotto on the 3rd floor of the Blood Soul Temple. Alright. It's just a faster version of Yuan 1. Should I call it Yuan 2? Luo Nan mentally prepared himself in this way. He really wasn't as excited as he was when he controlled Yuan E. He just secretly clenched his fist with the body he left in the real world. Luo Nan wanted to figure out what was going on. He put more effort into the changes in the sealed system. Though there was an additional Yuan too, the number of believers orbiting the core star region in the living starry sky did not increase. Instead, the Wraith sign's influence on the surrounding starry sky clearly increased. Its processing and manufacturing capabilities on the entire production line had a clear increase. At the very least, this proved that the mushed-mouth ape Yuan Tu was not a newly accepted believer. Instead, it was just a tool created by the Wraith sign through the special interference method of the Blood Soul Temple. Luonan did his best to find a basis for this phenomenon. Perhaps it was just like how his deep-sea scene needed Yuan Yi as a pillar in order to construct a relatively stable space. The power of the Blood Soul Temple also needed such a foundation in order to be able to display its power. Well, let's not talk about the details of the energy conversion. Using the mushed-mouth ape to exchange for the mushed-mouth ape, even if it was an accelerated version, was quite a subtle transaction. But when he considered the relationship between friend and foe, and the effect of early destruction, he felt an indescribable feeling. Also, did this sort of forceful conversion have a chance of success? Luonan thought about the economic problem. He wanted to conduct a further experiment. This time it was a mushed-mouth ape for a mushed-mouth ape. Perhaps he could make a slight change next time. Luonan's mind stirred as he pondered deeper. Someone's coming. The Wraith sign in the clouds reacted almost at the same time as his thoughts. An incorporeal wave transmitted, and Yuan Tu received the order from below. He instantly transformed into a streak of bloody light and entered the Wraith sign's gaping mouth. His form and shadow vanished. There was such an operation. Luonan watched as Yuan Tu transformed into a bloody light and returned to the third level of the cave, fusing together with the stone statue. The mushed-mouth ape statue was affected by this, and its veins and lines gradually grew brighter. It gave off a feeling of flesh and blood being reborn. Luonan didn't observe in detail because a thunderclap rang out 1,700 kilometers away in the area where Yuan Tu had transformed and reconstructed. Gong Qi's figure appeared from the clouds, drawing all of Luonan's attention. Gong Qi's soul body state was practically no different from a real person. He was even a bit younger than what was shown in the data. There was only a layer of green-gray light curling around him. It scattered like smoke, condensed like a wide robe, flickering indefinitely. Snake Tongue's figure wasn't by his side right now. Instead, Luonan's soul cloak fluttered faintly in the surroundings. The fine waves of the polar domain and the changes of order on the molecular and atomic planes were linked together in an extremely ingenious manner. The cloud world was truly the friendliest environment for the soul cloak, which operated with the condensation ring. Water vapor was abundant, and the mental plane and the material world were interwoven like a labyrinth. Even the slightest ripple would be drowned in the surging airflow of the high altitude. Luonan was at ease as he brazenly observed Gong Qi, but Gong Qi was completely unaware of this. This person carefully probed and searched within the clouds. Soon he captured the remnant traces of Yuan Tu's flight path, and he chased after him. But the more he chased, the more grave and grim his overly young face became. Gong Qi only flew about halfway through the 1,700 kilometers before stopping. He frowned in thought. Luonan indicated for the Wraith sign to leap into the depths of the polar domain. He continued to observe and wait with the most cautious attitude. This sort of scene had occurred many times in the past week. Luonan was testing the limits of Gong Qi's senses bit by bit. And up until now, this Deputy Secretary General, who had already stepped into extraordinary, had yet to receive any response worthy of Luonan's vigilance. Luonan was once worried that Gong Qi was putting on an act, but that he was actually setting up a trap in secret. But the result he obtained under his repeated attempts was the same from beginning to end. And during this cautious probing process, Luonan discovered a very interesting way of doing things by Gong Qi. It was about time now. Luonan used the hexier to check the time in the real world. It was currently 10:50 in the morning, November 26th, Xia City time. After Gong Qi's pursuit was fruitless, he adjusted his breathing a bit and controlled his mood. Then his figure flashed, and there was a clap of thunder as he leaped into the depths of the void. He appeared again half a minute later, and he was 1,200 kilometers away. Gong Qi's soul body traversed a great distance of 5,000 kilometers in a row after flashing 3 times in this manner. This sort of method was even more inconceivable than Yuan Tu's 30 times the speed of sound. But the area where Gong Qi finally appeared was still within the range of Luonan's soul cloak. Even though Luo Nan had intercepted the vast majority of the results of the closed system's large production line in a week's time, the soul cloak continued to expand endlessly within the friendly environment of the cloud world. 5,000 kilometers was no problem at all. Gong Qi never imagined that there would be someone who could firmly lock onto him and not leave him for even a moment under the continuous use of his soul teleportation ability. He just adjusted his breathing once more in the clouds, calming the exhaustion from his many teleportations. This continued for approximately 6 or 7 minutes before his figure flashed once more. He still used teleportation, but he only shifted about 400 kilometers. The margin of error was extremely small at this distance. After his figure flashed, Snake Tongue, who was draped in cloud muslin, was right behind him. Secretary General Gong. Snake Tongue bowed respectfully, but she maintained a subtle distance. Gong Qi didn't care about this. He held his hands behind his back as he leisurely observed the clouds. Several seconds passed before he slowly turned around. He smiled and said, "I'm not late, right? The Secretary General has always been punctual. It's fortunate that the society didn't have any arrangements for me during this time. I just rely on my time to get off work. Oh, right now in Chan City. It's 5 in the afternoon. Really?" Snake Tongue's face was hidden behind the cloud muslin. Her face couldn't be seen too clearly, but her sigh was soft and sweet-sounding. She didn't continue this topic. Instead, she changed the subject. "Secretary General, how are we going to search today? We're going to follow the same path as yesterday. How much of the trajectory determination of those 10 blood apes have been completed?" The blood ape Gong Qi spoke of was the same as the mushed-mouth ape that Luo Nan spoke of. It was just that the name was different. Snake Tongue casually waved her hand through the clouds, quickly drawing a relatively detailed trajectory map. The zigzagging lines crisscrossed each other, dazzling the eyes. It was fortunate that Snake Tongue was able to reproduce this plaything, and Gong Qi was able to look at it with extreme seriousness. "From today onwards we'll go to this area." Gong Qi began to make arrangements. "When I'm not here, you can continue to explore deeper. If you encounter any special restrictions, try using the restriction breaking technique I taught you. If it doesn't work, wait for me to come up and make a decision." "Yes." Snake Tongue responded respectfully as before, and the two leaped into the depths of the clouds. Though they were still within the range of the soul cloak, Luo Nan was disinclined to pay attention to what happened next. Ever since he received Cat Eye's precise intelligence, he had only made one thing clear from his observations today. Gong Qi was lying. Though Luo Nan didn't stare at the cloud world day and night, he could use the convenience of the Wraith sign to constantly pay attention to the situation here. Gong Qi would appear within the range of the soul cloak every time he paid attention to the cloud world for the past 2 days. Though Gong Qi frequently leaped into the depths within a range of several thousand kilometers, and he often separated from Snake Tongue, Luo Nan had never. Yes. He had never seen Gong Qi leave the cloud world. According to Cat Eye's intelligence, Gong Qi had been in closed-door training ever since he returned to headquarters. How could he go to work on time? There was no doubt that Gong Qi was lying to Snake Tongue. But Luo Nan had a corresponding guess in his mind long ago, but he wasn't in a hurry to come to a conclusion. He knew that rashly coming to a conclusion about an extraordinary was often the beginning of death, even though Luo Nan had been madly sprinting along the path of death. Let's observe for a while more. Let's observe for a while more. Luo Nan needed an even more ideal opportunity, an opportunity that could consign Gong Qi to eternal damnation.